Michael, good morning.
Good morning, David.
Nice to see you, and thank you for coming in today. We're looking forward to having a chat about various aspects of your security career and obviously the London 2020 Olympics.
Yes.
But first of all, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Michael Fuller. I was a commissioned officer in the British Army, and after a 21-year career, I established a company called Global Resilience Partners Limited. We had some very early successes with the London 2012 Olympics, being involved directly in the design and implementation of the UK's National Olympic Coordination Centre. We also led the planning for the Brazil 2014 FIFA World Cup and the design of their national security architecture across 12 cities. And we were also fortunate enough to work in the Middle East with critical national infrastructure, oil and gas, for the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation around designing their emergency response mechanisms and architecture. And we've done some work in the Safer City programme areas in Beirut, designing policing and security, and also in London with the London Resilience team, designing their information exchange solutions.
To do with 2012, London 2012, how early were you brought in? And what role did you play in the initial scoping and design of the overall management programme?
So the unique security challenge that the Olympic Games presented to the United Kingdom was based on scope and scale. So the sheer size of the Olympic Games. My initial requirement was to understand at a high level what the key elements of the security and safety and resilience needed to be, and then to be able to look into more detail into those security requirements so we could identify the organisations, the information exchange requirements, and the memorandum of understanding that we needed to put in place between those organisations.
Okay, so two questions then. First of all, looking back, did you actually understand what was required at the beginning, or did that emerge as you were going through the process? And the second question is, how many organisations were involved in the initial discussion, and how many organisations were eventually brought on as part of the overall management team?
To answer the first part of your question, no, we did not understand fully the scope and the scale, nor the complexity of the safety and security need. And that was because our security strategy was based on the UK's counter-terrorist strategy called Contest, which was not quite fit for purpose for an event of the scope and scale of the Olympic Games. The second aspect to your question, or answer to your question, is that the Home Office, the UK government, kept the planning and preparation fairly close to its own organisation. And therefore, initially, the numbers of organisations and agencies involved in the planning and preparation were very small.
Was there at any stage during the 4 years where you went, oh my God, we're in trouble here?
No, I wouldn't go to the extremes of suggesting we were in trouble. There were one or two, perhaps more occasions when our planning and preparation had to be very different to the routine security arrangements that we had in place. And for example, because we were putting in place with the National Olympic Coordination Centre a new level of coordination function, there were legislative arrangements, so legal arrangements that we had to amend so that our central government had access to information at a much faster timescale, shall we say, than they originally would have had.
That's an interesting point, because reading the post-event reviews, and we are very lucky because in London we have a massive amount of information that was put on record, it seems that one of the significant fundamental foundations that allowed London to work was a cooperation from the beginning between government agencies, the Olympic, LOCOG and IOC, and then local security agencies in the UK. And it seems that that was one of the real successful things that came out of that. How significant was that to you as a planner?
It was essential that we had that understanding and cooperation in place from a very early stage. But what I would like to say is you're absolutely right. The domains, as they were called, that were designed to establish a safe and secure delivery of the Olympic Games worked very well together. What took a lot more time was to get the engagement and understanding from the 19 agencies that had to come together in order to deliver a safe and secure games through the effective information exchange and effective collaborative planning and preparation.
Well, that brings us very nicely to the NOC, for which you are well known across the world. The NOC was the National Olympic Coordination Centre, which was the overarching architecture that allowed all of these agencies to come together. Would you like to tell us a bit about the NOC, please?
Certainly. The NOC was, as I mentioned, a new and unique capability, and I think I'm right in saying that nothing like the NOC had been in place since the end of the Second World War. Its principal function was to provide a coordination role around the understanding of national level risk and threats to both the UK, its infrastructure and the Games, but also to ensure that we had a single common point of truth with regards to what was happening at any one stage, whether that be from a terrorist perspective, a security threat other than terrorism, such as serious and organised crime, or general safety circumstances. It comprised upwards of 400 people once you take into consideration the shifts, the patterns that we had to work on a 24/7 basis. And it was also made up of 19 critical security and safety organisations.
Two questions from that then. Was there a problem integrating what one might call restricted information, intelligence, and sharing that within a wider community? And second, and this is another very critical issue, what role did training and exercising take in capability development?
And very valid questions. The national intelligence model for the United Kingdom allows our security services and agencies and security responders to receive the most appropriate intelligence at the most appropriate time to elicit the most appropriate response. During the Olympic Games, we had to change that model slightly to ensure that our critical resources were available at any one time on a national basis, but also to ensure that our key government decision makers had access to the right intelligence at the right time. Yes, there was initially a real reluctance to share intelligence, of course, as there generally is. And in the lead up to the Olympic Games and during the Olympic Games itself, the appetite for sharing intelligence became much less restricted out of necessity. That doesn't mean to say the sharing of intelligence went beyond those organisations that needed to know, because it was critical that it was still retained within those organisations that needed to know. What we had to do from a very early stage was a number of strategic, tactical and operational level workshops, tabletop exercises and scenario-based live play exercises using quite often real intelligence or based on real life scenarios. We had to test that the intelligence model would work. We had to test that we were able to share information in the right timescales between the right organisations. We had to test that we had the right response at every level of command, control and coordination. And I include in that the need for exchanging information or escalating decision-making from the gold level of command and control up to central government. And we did that using a progressive assurance model to ensure that every level down to individual people were tested and understood their role under a number of different threats and risks that were presented.